All right, hello and welcome to the first episode of the Be Supreme WellFit podcast. I am joined here today by special guest Megan McNamara. Megan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Ben.
My pleasure. So, Megan, could you please just give us a breakdown? We're going to talk about nutrition today, and could you just give us a little background about yourself, what you do, and yeah, go from there.
Great. So I am a registered dietitian, and I work in private practice outpatient nutrition counseling in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina. I work with patients in person, but I also see a lot of patients in telehealth that are all over the country. Mainly the things that I see people for are digestive issues, thyroid and other autoimmune diseases, weight loss, and a fair amount of women with polycystic ovarian syndrome or in general, like pretty painful periods.
Okay, very cool. So how many patients do you see currently?
Currently, I see about 150 patients. Some patients I see every single week, and some people have achieved their health goals, and I see them more as a maintenance type thing where we might only talk to each other once a month or every other month. But I do get to see a big variety of people.
That's awesome. Cool. So I want to ask you two things. They're kind of linked together. The first is kind of nutrition 101, and then what is the first thing when you sit down with somebody and you assess them, what's the first thing that you ask them or the approach that you take? Let's say they're, I know you deal with people who have a lot of digestive issues, you said, but let's say they're just an average person and the most common thing, they want to lose weight. What's the first kind of questions that you ask them?
Yeah, so when I first start working with patients, usually the first time I meet them, I spend about an hour to an hour and a half, which is a pretty long time, because if you think about it, normally when you go to your doctor's office, it's like a 15, maybe 20-minute visit tops. So we spend quite a bit of time getting the full health history, everything they've been dealing with, like sleep-wise, stress-wise, physical activity-wise, nutrition-wise, to get that whole comprehensive idea about what's going on. And through that conversation, usually that kind of helps pinpoint some of their health background, but also a lot of their different goals that they have. And then at that point, we can usually tailor the plan to be something that is customized to them.
Cool. Awesome. So going off of that, let's go with probably the most common goal that we both seem to have to approach, which is weight loss.
Yep.
Now, first of all, are there such things, do you believe, or what's your research say about good foods and bad foods? When someone comes in, are there foods that you say, you got to stop eating this? Or do you believe more in the approach of moderation and go from there?
That's such a good question. I don't know about you, but I, like, every day people come in and they're like, oh, I know this cookie's a bad food and I shouldn't eat it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you hear that a lot. Do you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like
I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
But I kind of go with the approach that the only bad food is the food that makes you feel bad. So if there is a food that your body doesn't tolerate, like you have an allergy and it makes you break out in hives or your throat swell up or cause a digestive issue, that's probably a sign that it's a bad food for your body. But in terms of all the other foods that people typically call bad foods, like cookies and brownies and cakes, I'm a big believer in that those foods are not bad foods. They're just sometimes foods, meaning that it's okay if we sometimes have them as long as they are in a combination with fruits and vegetables and healthy fats and some proteins as well.
Awesome. Well, I like that because I love cookies, so I love the sometime foods. But
brownies are my favorite.
To kind of go off of what you just mentioned a little bit, do you break down your nutrition advice into macronutrients, or do you focus more with the average person on just overall calorie consumption?
I focus more with the average person, more so on portions. I actually don't have any patients count calories or count macros at all, just for the purposes of sustainability. So in my practice, I work really hard to help patients make changes that they can continue for the rest of your life. And of course, if we're looking at someone that's an athlete or has certain more like sports nutrition goals, they're definitely going to be tracking in some capacity. But for the average person, I don't have them do any calorie counting at all.
Cool. Would you say that word sustainability, is that kind of the crucial main thing that you want to get out of your clients?
It is, because like kind of during that first interview that I usually do with patients, one of the biggest things I hear is, well, I lost 40 pounds on the Atkins diet, or I recently did the keto diet and lost a bunch of weight. But they always say, like, the second I stopped that, all my weight came right back on. So I really do try to help them figure out ways that they can not only take the weight off, but keep it off with still giving them like a good quality of life.
Awesome. So would you say, so those diets, when someone tells you that they've lost X amount of weight, and obviously, I mean, you can't, they lost it, maybe they gained some of it back, maybe they gained all of it back. What's your opinion on those types of diets, whether it's keto, fasting, Atkins, any type of trend diet, especially for people who claim that they work or they can do them? Do you think that they all eventually fade out? Do you try to gear people away from that? Or what are your views on the trendy or new styles of dieting in general?
That's a really good question. Yeah, you're right. And like in some capacity, like these diets do work, but then they seem to only work until they don't. So they only work until the patient, like say someone's on keto, like it only works until the person has a birthday party and wants to eat a piece of cake, right? And then at that point, like you have that sugar and then you're no longer like in ketosis, so it's no longer working the way you want it to. So the diets work until your life changes and you no longer want to be in that eating pattern. Or like with Atkins or South Beach, kind of the same thing. And then with like intermittent fasting works for a lot of people. And there is a lot of research with intermittent fasting that shows that there are some health benefits to it. And this is kind of where we come in, that we have to think about that we have to choose eating patterns that are good for your body, because everybody has like a unique set of genes. So there's not really going to be a one-size-fits-all diet out there that works for everybody. And when we really look at the research of intermittent fasting specifically, it doesn't, like the research doesn't show that intermittent fasting works any better than anything else. I almost think what works is that someone has a plan that they are excited to follow. So I don't necessarily have an issue with the Atkins diet or the Whole30 diet or keto or intermittent fasting, as long as the person who is doing it is enjoying it. And I guess the reality is it seems that most people don't enjoy it for very long. Gotcha. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it kind of goes back to sustainability that you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. And with the keto diet specifically, I think we also sometimes need like the bigger picture. For example, like the majority of people that are doing keto right now are doing it for the weight loss, and they kind of get excited at first because they're losing a bunch of weight. But long term, is weight loss a good enough reason for someone to do the keto diet for the rest of their life? I don't know. It might be for some people, but from what I've seen, that's not always the case. Whereas someone that might have Parkinson's disease or epilepsy or Alzheimer's disease, that might be a big enough reason for them to continue the keto diet for the rest of their life, because that's what the keto diet was honestly designed for, or people with different brain disorders.
Sure. Just real quick, just in case someone listening doesn't know, what is the keto diet?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so the keto diet is a diet where basically you restrict carbs down to about 5% of your daily energy intake. So honestly, this means that probably the only carbs that you're getting throughout the day are coming from your non-starchy vegetables. Keto limits basically any sugars, any of the obvious carb choices like breads, pastas, cereals, but also it's pretty restrictive on fruit. Since fruit does have natural sugars in it, that's pretty restrictive on that. But the whole point of keto is to turn your body from being like a carbohydrate burner to a fat burner.
For sure. Now, when you say, let's separate fats from fats, if you will, because I think a lot of people get fats that you consume confused with fats on their body.
Right.
Yeah, so when you say switch to fats, you mean, really the idea is to burn a lot of fat, but you're consuming a high percentage of fats at the same time, right, with keto?
Right, yeah. So you're consuming about 75% of your energy from fats when you're on the keto diet. And so basically, like a normal person that's eating like a traditional American diet, their storage form of energy is glycogen, which is the storage form of glucose, which comes from your carbs. So with the keto diet, it kind of switches that, and once you have run out of all your glycogen stores, you start burning fat in your body. So that is why the keto diet is mainly fats, to try to burn the fat, that's the energy that you consumed, but also the kind that's stored in your body.
Awesome. Just one more thing before we move on from the trendy diets. I want to go back to fasting. So, the benefits of fasting with digestion. What do you know about that, or what can you tell us about that? Because I've heard a lot of things about how it kind of gives your body a little bit of a break. Some people feel better when they fast because they're not using that energy to break down food constantly. And also, is smaller meals something that can mimic the idea of fasting as well?
So that's a good question. So I actually haven't heard of any benefits digestion-wise with intermittent fasting. That totally doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I just haven't personally heard of that. I usually hear about it more in terms of blood sugars. Mm-hmm. Like it can be helpful with some people with diabetes or who have irregular blood sugars. But I also kind of see the reverse. I see when people do intermittent fasting, typically they have like 2 larger meals instead of like the 3 like smaller meals throughout the day.
Gotcha.
Does that kind of answer what you're asking there?
Absolutely. It's kind of like a little bit of an overload in that small window. All right, cool. Just wondering what your thoughts were on that. So moving on. Well, actually, before we do that, taking the summary of what we just talked about there, you would say you break down someone's total caloric intake, what you would recommend, and then from there, let's say someone came to you that was excited, they did keto, they lost all that weight, and you tell them what you just told me, like it might not be that sustainable, or it is not sustainable because you've already fell off it. What is the switch? What is the transition? What do you kind of gear them towards? Multiple meals with proper portions, or is there another route? And how do you break that down for them?
Yeah, so what I normally gear people towards is to get like a good blood sugar control. We need to do about half of our plate consumed in vegetables. We need about 1/4 of our plate with starches, and then 1/4 of our plate in protein. And we need to do that for lunch and dinner. And then breakfast is a little bit dependent on the person. But in general, that's usually kind of just what I have people do is like think about their plate and use their plate as a measurement tool rather than having to measure food or weigh food or like count any calories. And so far in my experience, the transition can be a little bit different when you're coming from other diets, but this seems to work better in the long term.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
that sounds excellent, but let's say you're someone like myself, and I'm the difficult patient. So I come in and I eat every 2 or 3 hours or so. I can have a snack kind of thing. So I'm not having a plate with balanced things. Like sometimes I'll have to grab some type of bar or just have a yogurt, and I don't have the opportunity to maybe build a perfect looking plate until like dinner time. Do you
Yep.
kind of recommend that everything just adds up in the long run, or do you really stress getting all the balanced nutrients in that plate for every meal?
That's a really good question, and a pretty important one too, because if we, like, say we're having all of our foods, but they're not like together at lunchtime and we're kind of eating them separately. So say you make yourself like some crackers with some chicken salad and then like some greens to go with that for like the base of a salad. But you're not eating them all at the same time. So you might have like the crackers first, and then like an hour and a half later you have like the chicken salad that you made, and then, you know, another hour later you have like the salad greens that you made. That sounds like it would be the same as having it all together, but it's actually not. And the reason that it's not is because when you eat a carb by itself, so when you eat those crackers by itself, it actually spikes your blood sugar levels. And when you spike your blood sugar levels, your body's response to that is to release a hormone called insulin. And once that hormone is released, it brings your blood sugars back down, but it has to come down really quickly, so you kind of have a crash a little bit later. So this might be a situation, I don't know if you've ever felt this, where like you had a carb or something sugary, and at first like you felt like really good and you got like a burst of energy, but then maybe like 30 minutes later you kind of got really tired.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like that glycemic response from the carb. And what happens after that is that your blood sugars are so low that you end up craving more carbs and sugar all throughout the day. And that roller coaster of a blood sugar does not do your body any benefits to help you lose weight. So we really want to make sure, like anytime we have a carb, we mix it together with some fiber coming from your vegetables and some proteins. So that way your blood sugars don't have that big, fast increase.
Awesome. That was a great explanation. But I'm going to be difficult patient again. Because I'm going to be honest, I don't really like vegetables that much. I force myself to eat them here and there. So what are your do you just say to people, you got to suck it up? Or do you have an alternative to someone like myself who's not a huge vegetable guy?
Yeah, absolutely not. I do not tell them to suck it up. My little story with this, I hope my mom never hears this podcast, but growing up, my mom took frozen broccoli and boiled it for us. And I don't know if you've ever had frozen broccoli boiled, but basically it's really chewy and terrible tasting and has absolutely no flavor to it. So I spent probably about 23 years of my life like thinking that's what all broccoli tasted like, until one day I went over to somebody else's house and they had like roasted broccoli in the oven with some olive oil and some paprika and some garlic powder and like a whole bunch of spices. And I tasted it and I was like, wow, like this broccoli actually tastes good. So usually if, like, of course there's always going to be those vegetables that someone doesn't like, right? But usually I try to work with people to be like, how can we cook this differently? Or like, what spices can we add to this to make it have a better flavor and to taste differently?
Cool. So your first approach is how you prepare it and change it up like that to see if they like it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. How do we prepare it? What sauces can we put on it? Or can we like throw some spinach into a blender with some strawberries and bananas and kind of like hide the taste from it, like that type of thing.
Okay, cool. Could you just give us, if you have anything off the top of your head, like your top 2 or 3 quick ways that you would recommend getting greens in for someone like myself who doesn't like to eat vegetables?
Yeah. Best way to get greens in if you don't enjoy them is take whatever green you want, whether that's or you feel like you can tolerate the best, whether that's broccoli, green beans, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, and roast it in the oven. Because that gives it kind of like that crunchy texture, which can change it up a bit. Mm-hmm. Some of the most popular seasonings out there to hide your vegetables in are Old Bay and the Everything But the Bagel seasoning. Shout out to Trader Joe's for that one.
Awesome. Cool.
So that's one way. And the air fryer has actually been super popular too. I have had a lot of clients be super into putting like spinach in the air fryer or kale in the air fryer and turning things into like little kale chips. And same thing, like putting spices on them to help the taste of it.
Cool. So get creative. Google some stuff and
creativity. Figure out like whatever your spice is, and then just start putting that on everything. Or like lemon juice. Like if you're a person that you feel like vegetables are really bitter, if you get like some lemon juice and put it on, sometimes that can change the flavor profiling.
Awesome. That is great advice, and I'm gonna have to try that. Yeah, I changed up the way I did. I don't know. I just don't really. Well, I guess I like broccoli, but only when it's like cooked perfect and there's butter on it, which isn't the best. But asparagus I changed up the way I've made a few times, and things like that. So that's I do have experience with that working, just changing it up. So moving on, kind of that's the whole deal with the actual foods, but probably the almost if not more important, the mindset of the whole eating, which is where kind of the sustainability comes in. So how many people come to you and just don't know about nutrition, like they don't know that they should be eating this or that, and how many people come to you and they do know that what they're eating isn't right for them or they should be eating something different, but it's more of a mental and habit adjustment for them?
That's a really good question. And there's going to be kind of two answers to this. So people that I see that have different digestive issues, they're definitely coming to me because they don't know what's causing it. And then we kind of have to do trial and error. But someone that is coming to me in terms of weight loss, I would say 95% of them absolutely know what they should be doing. And they just need some guidance. So it's kind of like sometimes we need to know the why behind what we're supposed to be doing. Like everyone knows that cookies and cakes and bread have sugar in them, and that might not be like something that we can have every day, right? But if we don't understand like the science behind why that happens and how that affects your weight, then we're not as inspired to make that change happen. And then with that said, we usually know what we're supposed to do. And a lot of times, like, you want to work with a trained professional so they can kind of help you figure out why you're not doing what you want to do. And talking through, like, your barriers and kind of brainstorming with someone is really helpful in terms of achieving your goals.
Awesome. So kind of map it out for those who don't know what they're doing. I think that's definitely the harder part. I mean, if you don't know something, you don't know it, and then you talk to someone and they say, this is how you need to do it, and you can make those, you can make those changes fairly easily, but the mindset of it is not so easy. So I do want to ask you, because this is the most common thing that I come across, and I'm a little guilty of it. I'm not super terrible because I have a strong why when I diet and I can put my mind to it, but the late night eating, specifically the sweets. So I'm pretty sure you get this too, but a lot of people come to me, I'm good until the end of the night and I want sweets. What is your kind of approach to someone who says that to you?
Yeah. That is an awesome thought, and you're right. I have that happen all the time to myself personally. I crave sweets at night, but that is a thing for a lot of clients too. And a lot of that might come down to habits too. Like how many of us, when we were growing up, got a dessert after dinner? I know my family had milkshakes, honestly, every single night after our dinner. So sometimes that's just like kind of our habits, and we think we don't have like enough willpower to change that. But sometimes when there's someone else to kind of guide you to be like, hey, this is something that's happening every day. Like, is this an area that we could change? Sometimes it kind of helps our mind shift. Another thing that could be going on is if the person's not consuming enough fat with their dinner, they might not be feeling satisfied enough. And often when we're not feeling satisfied with our meals, then we're going to have those sugar cravings a little bit later on.
Gotcha. Okay, so two types of things. One, you got to look at the nutrition throughout the day, or especially towards the end of the day. And then two, work on breaking the habit. Your best recommendation for that is kind of have meet with someone, kind of have accountability.
Yeah, I think having an accountability buddy is an awesome tool. But that's not to say that's the only thing that works for people. I have had patients choose to journal. Like sometimes using a journal can or be a good source of accountability. I have a lot of clients that like to use a walking away technique, which basically means that when they start having the craving for the little Dove chocolate bar or whatever their crutch is, they decide to go for a walk or fold laundry or call a friend. And when they're done that activity, if they're still craving it, they allow themselves to have it. But usually I would say like at least 50-60% of the time, just walking away has distracted them enough that they forgot about wanting that brownie or cookie or piece of chocolate.
That's interesting. I never heard of that one. That's good. Have an
activity. I call it the delay and distract.
Delay and distract.
You distract yourself and you delay it, but you may or may not forget about it. And if you don't forget about it and you're still craving it, then allow yourself to have it and just know that you're making an empowered decision to have it. I think if you try to restrict too much and tell yourself that you can never have it, all you're going to do is crave it all day long.
That's good advice. So my personal experience with this, because when I'm not following a strict diet, I do fall. Now, is it bad? Is it bad to have a dessert after dinner all the time?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
as long as it aligns with your health goals and you don't have any medical illnesses that would be a reason that you shouldn't, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Not at all.
All right, you heard it here, folks.
That's what everyone wants to hear.
Yeah. No, but I guess the idea is moderation, and you have to be on top of it. If it's affecting you in a negative way, then you got to knock it off or cut it down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So I am definitely a person who does that. Usually, whatever it is, cookies mostly, peanut M&Ms. A lot this holiday season. It's been not so good, but I found somewhat not a replacement, because nothing replaces like the real thing, but like a substitute for that, like a protein cookie that's like half of something. Do you recommend things like that kind of don't necessarily break the habit of eating after dinner that's a dessert, but do you offer or do you suggest those like ice creams or alternatives to sweets?
Yeah, and we all kind of have our different styles, right? Like some people might prefer to have like the real thing and just like do it less often, where other people are totally into like the substitute. So I guess that's where like you just kind of need to think about like what works for you the best. Usually what I recommend are, you can make like a little, it tastes like chocolate ice cream kind of. Like you can like put a banana in a blender with like a little bit of like almond milk or regular milk and just a scoop of cocoa powder that you would like bake with. and it surprisingly kind of gives you like that chocolate ice cream feel to it.
Interesting.
Another thing that I personally have done this, and I've had a few patients really enjoy this. I keep a little bag of baking chocolate chips that they're unsweetened, and I'll take like just a few chocolate chips like when I'm having a chocolate craving, and I eat them and they're fine. But if I go back for another serving, when I have that serving, it's not sweet like other chocolate, so it like doesn't taste that good.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm like, okay, cool, like I got my fix, but I'm not like getting up off the couch to go get some more because it like honestly wasn't that great.
Gotcha. So what about people? It's hard for me to relate to this, but what about people who don't really have a sweet tooth, and overeating is the problem? What kind of timeline do you recommend for like in between meals, or what's the approach for overeating?
That is a really good thought, because you're right. I don't quite understand that either, because I have such a strong sweet tooth. But definitely portion control and like the need to just feel really full is a really common trend. Usually with that, I recommend using a few techniques that are called like mindful eating techniques. And the point of these are to kind of connect with your food, but also to slow down your pace of eating. The easiest one to implement into your life is to put your fork down in between bites of food. And it might sound silly at first, but next time, I challenge like everyone listening to this, that the next time you eat, notice this and try it, because what you'll find is that like you go and get a scoop of food with your fork and you like put it up to your mouth. And as you're chewing, like you're getting your fork ready for the next scoop, right? Like you're getting it ready to go.
Yeah.
But in this situation, if you put your fork down and like actually chew your food, and then not pick up your fork again and go to get your second scoop until you fully chewed your food, it really slows down the pace of your meal, and it allows you to enjoy it for a longer amount of time. And through that, I found that most people start receiving their fullness cues earlier in the meal, so then they don't have that like overstuffed reaction at the end where they're miserable and feel like they need to go lay down.
Yeah, that is great. I'm laughing so much because I've experienced this way too much. It's embarrassing. I probably shouldn't even say this, but like just a few days ago, I was eating this pasta, and I have found this new sauce that I just love. So I found myself halfway through almost out of breath, because I was like, I wasn't even breathing. Like it was like shoveling. It was just savage and disgusting, but I was like, wow, this is not good. And then, yeah, next thing you know, you're half a pound of pasta down, and you're like, I don't feel good. This was a mistake. It's just like that instant taste reaction that you just end up shoving it down. And I do the same thing with pizza, too. That's probably why I eat so much of it. But that's kind of like the Ben method. You just take the bite, and then you're eyeing up where you're going to bite next. And I definitely think that is a good strategy. What's that? To put your fork down, or take a break, or what's that called?
I just call putting the fork down in between bites.
Put the
fork down. Yeah, and you're right. It's like we usually do this with food that we like love so much, and it's so good because like we just want to just keep eating it. But the funny thing is, like, whenever I think about this, because I caught myself doing the same thing, I'm like, but wouldn't I want to enjoy that food for, like, a longer amount of time? Like, wouldn't it be cool to enjoy this pasta for, like, 15 minutes rather than, like, 2.5 minutes?
Yeah. Speaking of which, is there, other than the fullness factor, is there a benefit to, I mean, this sounds silly to even say, but what's the benefit of chewing your food or taking longer to eat your food? Because sometimes it takes longer to make it, and then you eat it in 2 minutes, and it took like 10 minutes to make. So it's like, it's heartbreaking.
Fantastic question. There is a lot of health benefits, digestive-wise, for chewing your food. You're actually supposed to chew your food like upwards of like 40 times before you swallow. And honestly, most people are probably like an anaconda where they like kind of just bite and swallow, you know?
Yeah.
But if we think about like surface area, would it be better to have like a pretty big chunk of food and like your digestive enzymes trying to like this big chunk of food down? Or would it be better to chew your food, get it all like applesauce consistency, and then like your digestive enzymes can like break that down and finish up the digestion process like a lot faster?
Cool.
Yeah, like we want it in that smaller surface area. So that's going to help your body not feel bloated, not feel like you have cramps or pain afterwards. And and then it'll also make you feel full a little bit faster.
Awesome. So let's talk about like real world application of the diet. For someone who's listening to this, they just heard all the information. What is the best approach for them to develop their own sustainable meal plan, and how crucial is, if at all, preparing your meals and prepping them in advance?
Yeah. So if we're thinking sustainability-wise, then I would challenge someone listening to this to pick one thing that they want to work on and just focus on that one thing until they feel like they got that habit down, and then add like another thing on top of that. So I think sometimes with health changes, we make the mistake of trying to do everything at once, and sometimes that can feel overwhelming, and that's where we're not able to stick to it for a long time. So instead of focusing on like breakfast, lunch, and dinner all at the same time, totally revamped, sometimes if you just pick one meal, whether you want to start with like the easiest meal or your like most difficult meal, just pick like changing breakfast habits first. And then once you get that, then move on to lunch or dinner. Does that answer the first half of your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. So just kind of, I think that's with anything in life when you have kind of goals, especially, we're in January now and you talk about the new year, and, we set the bar, not that you shouldn't have high standards, but the way you approach the ultimate goal needs to be structured. And I think that's kind of the message with that, just take it, your meals don't have to be perfect. Everything doesn't have to be perfect all week, every single meal. Let's just work on, especially if you're coming from a bad spot already, just tighten things up a little bit here and there. And then once you feel comfortable with it, move on to the next thing. I think that's great.
Yeah. Yep, and then you're asking about meal prepping.
Mm-hmm.
This is an area where I think people have to do some like self-reflection and think about what works best for them. So I have plenty of clients that are really successful with like prepping on a Sunday and kind of getting their meals together all throughout the week. And then I have like another subset of people that feel guilty that they're not doing that. But in reality, like the way their life is, they do better at like making extra food for dinner and then taking that as leftovers, but still making like a dinner every single night. So this is where we kind of get down to like what works for you isn't going to be the same thing that works for your friend or your cousin or your mother. So sometimes like asking what your friends do and trying it out, but not allowing yourself to go into that like guilt cycle if that's not what works for you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Again, it kind of individualized, but there's an approach to it for sure. I know for me, personally, the meal prepping, it's kind of changed because once you do it for a while and you understand foods and how you feel and how many calories you need, and the macronutrients and all that good stuff, you can eyeball things and you can kind of wing your day a little easier when you have an understanding of that versus someone who doesn't. As I wanted to get to the next level, per se, it became very necessary for me to prepare my meals because I couldn't leave things up to chance if there wasn't going to be some type of food in the cafeteria, or I didn't want to miss a certain meal because I knew if I did, I would be too hungry for the next one, and then I would end up kind of overeating from there. So for me, I have experienced that personally. It was a habit. I used to just kind of wing it, and some days it's fine, and I can because you get used to what you're supposed to eat. But then I'm talking on the extreme level because I was trying to really, cut down my body fat and perform at a high level, and there was just a point where that had to be priority because that was my goal. And before I did anything else, I needed to go to the store and I needed to cook or get what I needed. And it sets you up. It's just like preparation for anything. If you're prepared, then not saying things won't go wrong still, but at least you give yourself a better chance. But then to go back to it, just focus on the one thing that you want to improve, and then you can kind of go from there. Do you have a personal experience with meal prepping? Do you like to meal prep, or do you just kind of, what you need to eat and you find it as the day goes along?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit similar in your area that although, like, I'm not doing it from a standpoint of, like, athlete level needs, I know personally that if I come home in the evening, sometimes I don't get home from work until like 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and I don't already have something prepared, I am going to be so tempted to stop on the way home and pick up food. So for me, meal prepping works really well, just so I don't have that temptation or that exhaustion and like lack of desire to cook. So kind of like exactly what you're saying, even though for you it was for like your high level specialized needs, I think that can be translated to really any time of someone's health goal also.
The education factor in general. People, when they come to see you, are they blown away by what they learn from you? Because I don't know about what your experience was like in high school. I mean, in college, I don't think there's really any unless you take unless you're majoring in a course that requires it, you don't really need to take a nutrition class. I don't think that's a general education thing. So, in a world, or especially in our country, where we have heart disease as kind of like the number one killer, and we have obesity, do you feel like there's a major lack in the health education in the nutrition department?
I absolutely do, and I'm saying this honestly from more personal experience than professional experience. You're talking about like in middle school or high school, like I'm sure I know I had a health class, but I could not tell you one single thing that I learned regarding nutrition in that class. Like I don't remember it at all. And then even in college, like my major was nutrition and dietetics, and I feel like, and this could also be related to nutrition is a really fast-changing field, but I feel like some of the information that I learned during that time maybe isn't, like, accurate or wasn't presented in a way that, like, resonated with me. So, like, what I practice now is, and like my personal eating habits that I practice now are way different than I was doing when I was like in nutrition classes in college. And I think like the people that I work with now definitely are blown away when we have a conversation, because they're like, well, yeah, like I did know that, like I've always heard that I shouldn't eat these foods or I should limit these foods and have a lot of like fruits and vegetables. But we kind of get back to that why, like they don't know like why they're supposed to do those things. Because no one ever really told them. People are just like, oh, don't eat that food, and like you should eat these foods.
Yeah, I just think it's crazy. Obviously, with us being in kind of the health and wellness field, we feel a little more strongly about it. But it almost seems ridiculous how something that affects, we're talking about diseases, and people who then have to be on medication. We're talking about performance just in job and in life. And nutrition, it's like your body, your functioning is the core of everything else. everything else that you do. You're going to think better, you're going to study better, you're going to work better if you're fueled and you're running, and there's just such little time, or and the time that is spent is so vague and it's so general, and no one retains any of the information, even if it is constantly changing. So I guess my question to you is, where can people, or do you have a suggestion for somebody of where they can get educated, or how they can keep up and know what's going on if they're an average person? Like, they listen to this and be like, I should learn more about nutrition and what's good. What do you think they could do? Would your best advice be to see a professional like yourself? Or, I mean, because the internet is crazy. You can read one thing and then read another, and it's like, I don't know what the heck to do.
Yeah, it's such a hard question because, the first thought is, well, we have the internet, like, you can go read stuff on that, or you could, follow a health professional on Instagram or Facebook. But then we get stuck in this whole trap of, there are a lot of great health professionals on social media or on the internet, but there's also, like, a lot of really crappy ones out there, and you just don't know which one you're getting. I would recommend seeking out a registered dietitian if that's something that you're interested in. And there is a difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist. So if you're, Googling, like, your town name, like, type in registered dietitian. You could also use your local hospitals, because most of your local hospitals are going to have nutrition classes or health classes, workshops, and then also, like, on-site dietitians that could be a resource for you as well.
Is every registered dietitian, so kind of to your point, and this is in everything really, just because someone is registered or has their license doesn't mean they're necessarily, that good to be, like, maybe a lot of people have their driver's license and there's a lot of bad drivers, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Same with trainers, and all kinds of things. So, and I remember working in a program with some people who would see a dietitian, and it just didn't register. I remember asking them, like, what did you learn from the dietitian that you saw this week? It was like, oh, portion control, yada yada. And does every registered dietitian go through the psychology of it, or is it all kind of just the facts of food, and then they teach that? Like, did you have to take a psych, where'd you learn these habit practices?
I took, like, a general psych course in undergrad. But, like, to become a dietitian, you have to do 4 years in an undergraduate program. Graduate degree is not required yet. I think in a few years that is a requirement. But I would say about 80% of dietitians probably have a graduate degree. And then you have to do something called a dietetic internship, where you do 1,600 hours of supervised practice before you can sit for a test to be a dietitian. And during that time, there is no, or at least I never had any formal psychology training. So to answer your question, like, no, there's really no area that a dietitian has to do that stuff. So if someone is working with a dietitian and they're not feeling comfortable with that dietitian, or they're not feeling like their needs are being met, then there is no harm in getting on Google, reading reviews and finding a new person that you feel might better fit your needs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not to knock anyone, but I mean, in a situation where we talk about where the food habits are more than the not knowing, then the habits and how they act is extremely important. So they're not really going to change just by hearing, hey, you need more fat in your diet. You know what I mean? They need those put your fork down strategies and stuff like that.
Sorry, go ahead.
And I was just saying they need those strategies that you said. So how can someone, is that kind of the tell, like, if they don't give you ideas to break your habits? Because people in programs that see a dietitian or whatever, maybe they're outpatient from something, how can they know if they're getting the best advice for them?
I would say if you feel like you left the room with a game plan, like you know exactly what you're supposed to do, then you are probably working with someone that's fitting your needs. But if you maybe had a consult with a dietitian and they went over some basic stuff and handed you like a one-page handout, and you kind of left the room and you're confused and you didn't have a chance to ask questions, then that might not be a good fit. It's kind of like the same thing with like your dentist or your doctor. Like if you are like leaving your dentist or your doctor's office and they didn't answer your questions and you feel like more confused leaving than when you went in, like you're probably going to find a new one. You're probably just going to find someone else to go to. At least I would. So I would think of it in those same terms.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a good approach, because I meet a lot of people that happens. You know, they see it's a dietitian and they don't learn anything, or they hit them with the, here's your plate, have a thumb of fat and this or that, and they're just like, what does that even mean? Like, you know, it doesn't register. Like, they see the pretty colored picture of the plate, and it doesn't really translate into their life. They get it, but it's like, how am I going to do this now? So I don't know. I've had a lot of experience with people like that. So that is good information from you, and we appreciate that. My last kind of two questions here are about water and alcohol. So what do you do with someone who likes to drink? They like to have a drink every night. Is it a bad thing, good thing? Is it the same with the food moderation? Or do you kind of steer people away from alcohol consumption?
Yeah, I think for the average person, it's probably the same thing as kind of like moderation with your sweets. Like, have it every once in a while when you're intending to have it. But is it ideal for it to be an everyday thing? Probably not. But for someone like yourself, then that's like an athlete, the reality of like being able to reach those health goals with doing a drink every night is not really realistic.
Sure.
And then when you're asking about like alcohol and water, so alcohol is a pretty big dehydrator. So for people that know that they're going to have a glass of wine or a beer, or they have a social event coming up where they know there's going to be alcohol, I usually recommend for every glass of beer or wine that you have, drink 1.5 glasses of water to help counteract that effect.
Great. Yeah, I've heard that before. That's good stuff. Hopefully people do that, but that's good. So yeah, kind of tie it into the way you would eat the foods and sweets and stuff like that. So again, the habits and not kind of approaching it in a smart way of one step at a time, maybe one less drink or this or that throughout the week. Now the water overall consumption, because this is something that I stress because I know its importance with performance. So, because I always felt, this is my opinion, that water is not that it's going to change your life completely, but I always felt it was the easiest thing that you could change that has the biggest impact on you overall. I don't know if you agree with that, and how much water should people be drinking?
I fully agree with that. It's kind of like that low-hanging fruit. Like well, for most people, water is free. Most people have pretty easy access to it. So it's kind of that like low-hanging fruit where, yeah, you're right. It's one of the easiest changes that you can make that's going to give you some of the most benefits. So water helps your body flush out toxins. It can help skin. It can help keep like the bacteria in your mouth away to prevent plaque and gum disease and all that kind of good stuff there. In terms of how much you should have, I usually recommend doing half of your body weight in ounces. For example, if you weigh 200 pounds, then you would do 100 ounces of water per day. Or if you were 100 pounds, then you do 50 ounces of water per day.
Ah, cool. I never heard that formula. Now that, off the top of my head though, that kind of seems, well, what is that, like almost a half gallon for the 100-pound person? Or right? What's a half gallon? 64? Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so yeah, Yeah, that seems... Is that like
I
minimum?
hesitated when I said that because I'm like trying to do the conversions in my head too, and I'm like, this should definitely be something I should know off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah, no, yeah, that's right. So, okay. So is that the minimum, or is that like a good amount right there? Like, where does this number?
That's the minimum. Like, that's, so if you're 200 pounds and you're doing 100 ounces of water, that's like the minimum that you should be doing. If you are doing like pretty heavy, vigorous exercise that you're sweating a ton, like you definitely want to go up on that and maybe do an extra 16 or 32 extra ounces. But like minimum for body functioning, you want to keep it about half your weight in ounces.
Great. Yeah, because I know I drink a ton of water. I'm probably like, oh God. So that's a good question. Can you drink too much water?
Every time I get asked that, I always think of the competition. I don't know if you remember this from a long time ago when the Wii first came out. Do you remember this happening? Do you know what I'm going to say?
No. The Nintendo Wii?
Yeah, there's a Nintendo Wii.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
There was a competition that came out that it was like hold your Wii for a Wii, where people had to drink a whole bunch of water, and whoever could hold their pee the longest won a Nintendo Wii. This was when it was like super popular and like hard to get your hands on.
Oh my
And during that competition, I can't remember if it was a man or a woman. I think it might have been a woman. Actually passed away because like the diffusion or osmosis, I can't remember the chemistry term for it.
Oh my gosh.
Like had an issue where she drank too much water and it caused a lot of harm. In that situation, it was a lot of water really, really fast and like a lot of water. So I think if you are using common sense and you're not like forcing yourself to drink an excessive amount of water, that your body's going to be sending you signals to stop at some point, and just like listen to your body and like recognize those signals.
Wow, I know, I never heard of that story. I mean, that's terrible. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. It's just like, it seems just insane. Like, wow. Okay, good. So
yeah, it is.
Really, probably not.
It was a big scandal at the time.
A wee scandal. Okay, cool. So, my questions for you, last two questions. What is your favorite healthy meal or favorite just average meal? And what is your favorite cheat meal?
Oh, okay. Favorite healthy meal. So this changes a lot based on like what I'm getting tired with. But my current kick is I've been making like a bowl for dinner a lot. That's like a Korean beef bowl that has cauliflower rice and carrots that I spiralize with zucchini and mushrooms with like a Korean sauce on top of it. So that's my favorite healthy meal. Sometimes I'll put like avocado on top of it too.
Cool.
And my favorite cheat meal, having a really hard time deciding right now between pizza and macaroni and cheese. But I'm going to go ahead just for the sake of being decisive and saying that it's homemade macaroni and cheese that's been baked in the oven.
Okay, cool. Now, do you recommend that people have cheat meals once a week, or kind of like a refeed day, if you will, maybe once or twice a week?
I think that might depend a little bit on like what their goals are. I usually kind of recommend it in like different terms. Like, yeah, if you want to have a cheat meal and like your favorite is pizza, like go have a slice of pizza, but like let's pair that with salad and kind of make it like a balance where your blood sugars are still well controlled. Or if we go with my other favorite, like macaroni and cheese, like could we do macaroni and cheese with some pork and like green beans and kind of balance it out?
That's great. Yeah, that's a good recommendation, because I think some people, that's a big popular thing when if you were to just Google going on diet or whatever, I'm sure you would find like eat a cheat meal once a day kind of thing. Not once a day, I'm sorry. Eat a cheat meal once a week kind of thing to spike everything, to do this or that. But I think it kind of depends on how intense the diet is through the week, what is the long-term goal, and again, sustainability, right?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, Megan, if someone wanted to contact you or reach out, where could they find you?
The private practice I work with is called Summerfield Custom Wellness. So that can be found at summerfieldcustomwellness.com. And my contact info, my email, and my phone number are on that website. So feel free to reach out with any questions there.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And if anyone has any questions about the podcast today, you can feel free to email besupremefit@gmail.com or leave a comment below if the platform that I post this on allows you to do that. Thanks for listening. And Megan, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for all your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben.
All right. That's a wrap. See you later.